And there we go. You may recognise that as a couple of bars from You've Got a Friend from Carole King's classic 1971 album, and the focus of today's review, Tapestry. What? Oh, my bad. Apparently today's review is not the classic Carole King album Tapestry. It's the Stonemaier Games game of the same name, Tapestry, designed by Jamie Stonemaier, not Carole King. I always get those two mixed up. Hi, Not Board Gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now, unless you've been living under a board gaming rock over the last few months, there's no way that you will not have heard of Tapestry by Stonemaier Games, designed by Jamie Stonemaier. Of course, Stonemaier Games famous for games like Viticulture, Wingspan, Scythe, and Jamie Stonemaier being the mind behind many of the great Stonemaier games. And when it was announced a few months ago that he was releasing a new game called Tapestry, well, this thing shot straight to the top of the hotness. I mean, people couldn't either get enough of either really wanting the game or really kind of down-marking the game on BGG before it had even come out. It caused a little bit of a controversy and certainly a divisive nature. As happens with most Stonemaier games these days, it didn't come to Kickstarter. There was a pre-order in place, and what I did as soon as the pre-order happened is I clicked order, and then it arrived just over a week ago, and I've played it more or less continuously since then, so I could get together for a review, or get my thoughts together for a review. So what I'm going to be doing today is having a look at Tapestry by Stonemaier Games, the solo mode in Tapestry, because of course this is a solo based channel, and let's kind of find out what my thoughts are on it. Now, normally I would talk about the box and I would talk about the contents, but I've already done a fairly in-depth unboxing of Tapestry, so we're going to move straight in to the gameplay and my thoughts on Tapestry by Stonemaier Games, designed by Jamie Stonemaier. So Tapestry by Stonemaier Games is, and it classes itself as, a civilization game. And in the solo game, what you're going to do is you're going to play the part of one of 13 various factions. Now, there are more factions for the multiplayer game, but there are 13 solo factions that you can use. And you're going to fight against an Ultimate AI and the Shadow Empire and try and progress your civilization the furthest to score the most points. To do that, you're going to progress along these various tracks here. We have 4 tracks: an exploration track, a science track, a military track, and a technology track as well. And you're also going to, at some point, potentially get some landmark buildings to place on your capital city. These things help you score points. At the end of the game, after you have done 5 income turns, then that's it, that's game over, and the person or the player, be it yourself or the automa, with the most points wins the game. In the solo game, and also in the main game itself, a player is going to get a player board, and you can see a player board just here. Now, this player board has no asymmetry. It's exactly the same for every player. You're going to have the board, you're going to put some resources on the 0, there we go, you can just see the resources, and you're going to place some little buildings up here as well, always leaving the left column empty. However, as I say, there's no asymmetry, so what's the point in having the same board? Well, alongside the board, what you're going to do is you're going to pick one of the 13 factions. You're going to deal 2 and pick 1. And that goes there. And you're also going to pick one of the capital cities. Now, I think there are 6 capital cities, and you're going to put that there. And that is going to add an element of asymmetry to the game. So it makes sure that most games you're not going to be playing exactly the same. Now, in a multiplayer game, everybody's going to do this. In the solo player game, you're the only person that's going to be doing that because you're the only solo player. The automa does something slightly different, because the automa has got his own player board, and that's this board here, which is different obviously to a normal player board. Now, when you set this up for the automa, what you're going to do is it's defaulted to level 2 as the automa difficulty on there. You can pick another level to go on there, so if you wanted level 1, there's a card that goes on there and that overrides that, and that tells you what actions the automa is going to take on each income turn. But what you also do as well is you're going to roll the dice to find out what faction is going to go in there, and the automa will play as a faction, and that will go on there. And you set up, at that point, your Automa deck or your Automa card, you set up your player board, but there's also another player. So far so Scythe then, and that's no surprise in the fact that it's coming from the Automa factory, the same people that did the Automa for Scythe. So you've got your player board set up, you have the Automa player board set up, but as I said, there's another player, and this is classed as the Shadow Empire. And what you will do, he doesn't have a board, but you're going to set up a number of his kind of towers there for the Shadow Empire. Now, whereas the Automa will carry out functions that are more or less in line with how you play the game, the Shadow Empire is a little bit sneaky. All he's going to do is literally move around the board and get into various parts on these exploration tracks or on these tracks here before you do and before the Automa does maybe, and prevent you from getting some of the bonuses and some of the benefits and some of the landmarks that are on here. So he acts as like a half player. So you've got yourself as one player, the Automa as another player, and the Shadow Empire helping the Automa out as a half a player. So that's almost the game set up there. The final thing that you're going to do is you need to allocate a favoured track for both the Automa and the Shadow Empire. And to do that, you're going to take the science die, and you're going to roll that for the Automa, and there we go. It's saying that on that one, the Automa's favoured track is going to be the exploration. And what you're going to do is you take one of the Automa's towers and you're going to place it on there. You'll do exactly the same for the Shadow Empire. And there we go, he's got military, and I will take one of their towers and place it on the military track. And as we speak about how the Automa deck works, it'll become apparent why we're doing that. To win at Tapestry, you have to score the most victory points after the 5th income turn, and we track our income points by this track that goes all the way around here. And as you can see, I only have 2 markers, but there are 3 players. There's myself, there's the Automa, and there's the Shadow Empire, and that's because the Shadow Empire in the solo game doesn't actually score for itself. It may contribute to the Automa scoring, but it doesn't score for itself. And you will mark your victory points as you go around the board, and you can get to here, and then you'll put a marker for 100, and then you will take another cube and you will carry on your score. And apparently a very good score is round about 300. I can absolutely guarantee as a solo player I've never actually got there yet. So Tapestry, it's a civilization game and a point scoring game at the same time, pushing your little cubes around the board to track your scores. So as I mentioned, Tapestry is played over a number of rounds, and there are 5 income turns, and the game finishes after one player has finished his 5th income turn. Then everybody else gets to finish their income turns and scoring is done. The very first go that you have is an income turn, so you're already using up one of those income turns on your very first go, and it has limited ability. And generally, if you're playing the solo game, unless you're playing on level 1, it has exactly the same outcome on every go. So for yourself, what you would do on your player board is you would score yourself on any of the uncovered areas here, and I'll just hold this up. Imagine that every area is covered up until the very last go, the very last column. So what you would get is, on your very first go, you're going to get a currency resource, you're going to get a science resource, you're going to get an exploration resource, and you're going to get a military resource, as well as getting a tile to lay on the board and also a tapestry card. And the Automa is going to get a tapestry card, and that's it. That's the first go gone. You've already used up one of your income turns, or the game's income turns, one of them's already been used up, and it's exactly the same every single game. I don't know why they have that in there, because it feels like part of the setup of the game. As I say, unless it's level 1, it just feels like part of the setup of the game. For me, it feels like a wasted turn. Saying you've got 5 income turns, it could well have been a game that's played over 4 income turns. But that's it, that's the setup there. I've gone through my first go, I've got my tapestry card, I've got my tile, he's got a tapestry card, and I have a resource of each type, and that's it. That's the first go gone. And then what we're going to do is we'll move into an advance turn. because most of the turns that you play in Tapestry are going to be advanced turns. And what you do for an advanced turn is you're going to use one of your resources down here. So they were allocated in the income round, and you're going to use one of the resources to move along some of the tracks here, be that exploration, science, military, or technology. So for example, here I could use any resource on my exploration track here, and I'm going to move my little cube along one, and that gives me 2 of these tiles. Now, what will happen then is the autumn is going to take their turn, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. Then it comes back to me, and I will use yet another resource, and I can advance it again on this exploration track or any of the tracks there. And if we look at this one here, on the second one, what that allows me to do is lay one of these tiles on the board, because as well as being a civilization game and a point scoring game, Tapestry is also a tile laying game, something similar to Terraforming Mars. So if I'd done this here, I've used a resource now, I'm going to lay this tile on the board, exploring the landscape, and I also get the resource that's on there, and that tells me I can get a technology token on there, which is great. So I will take one of these here, but also what that allows me to do by laying that tile is it allows me to score some victory points. Because as I said, laying a tile allows me to get some victory points. Now, if I lay this tile along here, and it has to be adjacent to somewhere that I own, and I can match any kind of territory to any territory on the other side. So here you see we've got like half land, half sea, half land, half sea, and all sea there. I have half land, half sea, so that there matches. I have all sea there, and that's okay because half of that is sea, and I have all sea there. I don't have land there. For every territory that matches, I get a victory point. So that's 1, 2, 3. Nothing there because, of course, I don't match land to ocean there. So that, by laying that tile, that allows me to get 3 victory points. So let me just put that right. 1, 2, 3, and I'm off on the victory point tracker there. And as I mentioned earlier, it also allows me to get a technology card as well. Because these technology cards, although when I first get them, they give me nothing, as I get to the next income round, I'm allowed to promote one of these technology cards up to the next level, and I would then get whatever's in that circle there, and in this case I would get another 3 victory points. So technology cards are another way of kind of earning victory points and additional bonuses, because not only is Tapestry a civilization building game where you're scoring points and you're laying tiles, but it's also a little bit of kind of a tableau game as well, a tableau building game where you're building cards to score you more points. So as I progress along each of these tracks, sooner or later I'm going to get to a spot like here which allows me to grab a landmark, and a landmark is one of these wonderfully sculpted buildings that the game has become quite famous for. So on this one here, the first kind of landmark I'm going to get is this tower. And what I do with this tower is, unless you're the nomads, you don't place it on the board. I'm going to place it onto my capital city tile, capital city board, and this effectively at some point may grant me some victory point scoring on there. And I'll come to exactly how that works. So there we go. I'm going to put that just there. As I fill up my capital city board with either landmarks or buildings that I could take from my scoring card, when it comes to the income round, I can then score victory points from this. So for every row that I have completed and every column that I have completed, if I've unearthed enough of these kind of grey buildings from here that allow me scoring, I will get a victory point for each row and each column that I have completed. And that's where the kind of civilization part comes in, because what you're doing is you are effectively kind of building up this capital city with these various landmarks and these tiny little buildings to score further victory points. And each of these little red dots means that you cannot actually place a building on there. So it is a civilization building game, it is a point scoring game, it is a tile laying game, and it is a tableau game as well, and it's also a little bit of a spatial puzzle game as well. It's got a lot going on for it at the moment. So it's a civilization, point scoring, tile laying, tableau building, spatial puzzle game so far, but that's not all that Tapestry is going to throw at you, because one other thing that Tapestry can do, that Tapestry will ask you to do, is also conquer as well. So it becomes an area management game as well, because one of the things that you do as you move at the military track is you're going to get these, you're going to eventually come across these conquer icons, and what that means is you can take one of your little towers and you can move on to an explored land that's adjacent to one of your lands, and you can conquer that land. And you will also, at some point, if you've unearthed everything and the right kind of scoring techniques here, you will then score victory points for each one of those that you conquered, and you have a tower on there. But as well as you conquering, of course, you also have the Automa looking to conquer the area as well. And eventually what's going to happen is, sooner or later, is that this Automa, who's spreading out as well and is going to earn victory points from every area that he controls, is going to want to come along and maybe conquer one of your areas. And that way you can actually you can get toppled on there, and that means that you will lose victory points that you may have had before, or the amount of victory points, not lose them, but you won't gain as many because he's come along and toppled you. But it also works the other way as well, is that you can actually spread out onto his area and topple him as well. So this civilization, point scoring, tile laying, tableau building, spatial management, area control game just keeps throwing more and more things at you to either control, to mitigate against, to think about, to juggle, and also to kind of score points at the end of it. There's a lot going on in this game. So not only do you score victory points by kind of building your civilization, by managing the spatial puzzle, by conquering areas and laying tiles, is there are also some achievements as well. And you can see there are 3 achievements. And the first achievement is to complete any advancement track. And that means that if you get to the end of the track first, you're going to put a little cube on there and you're going to claim 10 victory points. That still leaves it open for the Automa to claim 5 victory points if they complete after you, or vice versa. So that's that one. There's also, you can get victory points for toppling opponent outposts. So you can topple 2 outposts. The first player to do that will get 10 victory points. And then there is an achievement criteria for conquering the middle isle, and that's this isle here. If you are the first one to conquer that isle, then you will get the 10 victory points, and if the Automa comes along and they conquer it, then they will get 5 victory points, and vice versa. And the Automa is set up in such a way that it will race towards that middle tile at the beginning of the game as well. So off the bat, and if I'm looking frazzled, that's because Tapestry is asking a lot of you. It's asking you, first of all, to build your civilization and advance along the tracks, effectively pushing cubes up the board. It's asking you to do some tableau building by getting these technology cards and promoting them and getting victory points that way. It's asking you to do some terraforming Mars-style actions by laying tiles and claiming the rewards that are on the tiles. It's asking you to do some area control by spreading out your little towers and conquering other people. It's asking you to do some resource management as you get resource on the income turns and you spend those resources to advance up each and every track. It's asking a lot of you, and it's pulling all that together as you're going throughout the game. But then the asymmetry comes in as well. So the asymmetry is when you have your faction card, and each of these faction cards is different, and each one has a different ability. So for example, on the leaders card here, it says the leaders excel at cultivating leadership abilities of their citizens. At the beginning of your income turns 2 to 5, you may place a player token on an uncovered leader square on this map, so there's 4 here, to advance for free on the corresponding track. Gain the benefits, but you may not gain the bonus, and there are benefits and bonus on each of these tracks. So this gives you effectively a free move on each track, but that's just on the leader one. There are 13 other factions that throw different things in there as well. So this provides an element of kind of uniqueness to every single game, and the asymmetry that we're looking for. Sooner or later though, you're going to come to the end of your advanced turns because you used all your resource, you can't move anywhere else on the board, and that will then trigger the next income turn. And that means that you're going to be playing a Tapestry card, and that's what the game is called after, the Tapestry cards. So when you come to the income turns are income turns 2 to 5, you're going to follow what's on your card here, on your player board here, the turns of the income turn here. And the first thing is to actually activate the special ability that's on your faction card. So as I mentioned, we would cover one of these up on the leader's card, and we would advance along a track and maybe gain a benefit from that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to play one of your Tapestry cards. Now, Tapestry cards will build up as you progress through the game. You will get more and more, and you get to get a choice, and each of these Tapestry cards is going to cover a space on your player board, and maybe if you're the first person to get to that era, you're going to get the bonus. In this case, it's going to be any random resource. And as you can see on this Tapestry card, what it says here is, on this era, whenever you place an income building in your capital city, you will gain 3 victory points. And these are income buildings, and you get to uncover these or place these in your capital city by uncovering various things on the various tracks there. So if I had placed that on my capital city, that would score me 3 victory points. But as you can see, there are a wealth of Tapestry cards, and that's what the game is named after, is these Tapestry cards, and that allows you to then play these Tapestry cards on there and get the bonus that's on there. Then what you're going to do, as you look on the player board, it's asking you to promote any technology cards that you have, so you would push those up there, and you're also going to score as well. And as we move along here, any that you've uncovered on here will give you your scoring mechanism. So there we go, that would give me let's see, a victory point for each technology card that I've got. Then if I'd got down here and I'd uncovered that one, that would give me 4 victory points. Here I would score for every row or column that's filled on my capital city mat, and here we go, I would also get victory points if it was this one for every territory that I control. So that's another way that you will gain victory points as the game progresses. However, because your very first turn is going to play that very first income turn, that means that you're only going to get 4 income turns left, and that means 4 opportunities to score the big points. And finally, what you will do on the very last turn of the income turn is you're going to gain your resources, and you gain resources again by any of these that you've uncovered. So if all but there were uncovered, I would get 2 currency. If all but there were uncovered, I'd get 3 of the science workers, and etc., for of course exploration and for military as well. And that's how you will then build up your resources, which will then dictate your next goes in the advanced turn, before you then have to kick back in for another income turn. So that's how my game progresses. But what about the Automa? I'm not playing this on my own, I'm playing this against an Automa. And that's where the Automa deck comes in, and that's these cards here that you'll get in the pack. And essentially at the beginning they're split into 2. You get a small decision deck, and then the rest of the cards make the progress deck. And what happens is you're going to draw 2 of these cards out every Automa turn, so when you've had a go. And what you do is, any way that you want, you can put it that way or that way, you're going to line the cards up, and that gives you this section here, this entire section, gives you your Automa moves for both the Automa and for the Shadow Empire. So if you look at this here, blue is Automa, grey is Shadow Empire. This blue one here means that the Automa can move on any track, but you need to know which track it means by any track. So you then follow this path here, and as you can see, for the Automa it's top down. For the Shadow Empire, it's bottom up, and here it gives you a little symbol. That means the favoured track. So if you remember, we rolled for a favoured track at the beginning of the Automa, and that means that that is the track, and that comes up quite often, that favoured track, that the Automa will actually progress against. It will race up that track and try and get that 10-point achievement for meeting the for achieving the kind of end of track first. And that's how the Automa progresses. And these can do a number of things. They can move it up tracks, which then will then trigger whatever's on the track. So be that a conquer action, or be that an exploration action, or will it be, I don't know, resetting the technology cards, or maybe rolling the science die and getting some of the benefits from that. So, as I say, the Automa will work through this limited deck to start off with, and when it's done that, that's the end of its go. That triggers the income phase for the Automa, and we then move on to the scoring for the Automa for that phase, for that income phase, and then the next advancement phase starts. So the Automa's income phase kind of works in a similar way to yours. You kind of follow similar processes here, and here on the board you can see. So as level 2, the first thing you do, and as you can see on each one of these there's a number, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and what that means is that those are on the income phases where you actually action these. The first one gives you a couple of hearts, and that means that if your Automa or the Shadow Empire is on their favoured track isn't as far progressed as another player, then it switches favoured tracks on that. Then we get this here, which means that the card that they have, so you've chosen a faction at the beginning, it will activate the actions on that card. So you can see on Explorers, on income turns 2 and 4, they move on the exploration track. On income turns 3 and 5, they move on the military track. Then we go through the scoring, and this is the scoring down at the bottom. So the very first phase, here we go, that's the first income phase done. Let's look at the first scoring here. For every property they have and every territory they own, they get 1 point. For every point they've moved up on the military track and on the science track, they get 0 points, and every point they've moved up on the technology and the exploration track, they get 1 point. And when it starts off, that's relatively straightforward. However, as you can see right at the end, they get 3 points for every property they own and every territory that they own. They get 2 points for every space that they moved up the military and the science track, and they also get 3 points for every space they moved up the technology and the exploration track. And let me tell you that as they start progressing up these tracks, of course, they're going to start potentially getting more landmarks and more territories that they own, and these points really, really matter. And the way that the Automa actually gets those territories is pretty good, and that's where the Shadow Empire really works against you. So if we look at these particular cards, and what we got here is that if we look at the Automa itself, you pull out this card and it says that the Automa here is going to move its marker on the track that it's furthest forward on the advancement track. And here we are, we'll say that exploration is the one that's furthest forward. It's going to move its square into there. Because it's moved into this and it's the first one to move into this, it takes a property. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the train station, which is this one here, and it's going to put it on its scoring mat. There we go. So it goes on its scoring mat. Oh, there we go. And then if we look at the next action, it says that the Shadow Empire, which is the half player, is going to move on any track and it will favour upwards on the science. And look at that. Its next go is going to move it into an area where nobody's been before, into an area where nobody's been before, and that is going to get this building, and that's going to put that on the scoring mat of the Automa as well. So as I said, the Shadow Empire, although it has limited movement and limited impact, what it does do is it can get buildings and score for the Automa. And the Automa itself will go around and it will collect its scores itself, be it its territory, or by collecting landmarks, or by moving up each of these tracks. As I mentioned, what happens is when the Automa has depleted its decision deck, it will trigger the income round, and part of the income round, as well as scoring, is going to be adding 2 more cards to the decision deck, which you then shuffle, and that will dictate the next advancement phase for the Automa. So what that means is each round his phases get progressively longer, and he has more opportunities to score points, as does the Shadow Empire, and beat you to those achievements as well. So it's kind of when you first look at it, it feels like it might be a little bit complex, but it's kind of an intuitive system, and it does ensure that the Automa has this continual progression of trying to beat you, of trying to get more points than you, of robbing you of those landmarks, which could give you significant points, but will absolutely give him significant points. And there you have it. Each round will then continue until you've reached the 5th and final income round, and then what will happen is you will, if you're the first person to reach that, then you will finish that income round, and then the Automa will continue playing its cards until it has finished that income round, and then the final scoring comes in, and that's it. You will then tally up the points and find out who has got the most victory points. You know what, there is a lot going on in this game. It's got some wonderful production values. There are a lot of mechanisms to kind of think about and a lot to come to grips with, and certainly as a solo player and using the Automa, you end up kind of thinking about mitigation strategies. You end up thinking about not only how you progress, but how you withhold the Automa from getting those victory points, from doing what the random cards are going to tell you to do. And it becomes a real, I don't know, a real puzzle that you're just adding to all the time. Is it hand management? Is it resource management? Is it an exploration game? Is it a civilization builder? There is so much going on in this game. A lot of thought has gone into this game. A lot of thought has gone into these really slick mechanisms that are here. And, you know, there is a hell of a lot of game here. And not all of it quite links together? Because I seriously think that Tapestry is unlike any other game out there, but it's also made up of many other games out there. And I think that the problem is with throwing so many ideas into one game is making them link up thematically, making them feel like an intrinsic part of the same puzzle is never going to happen. You are going to get a disconnect, and unfortunately that's what's happened here. Is Jamie Stonemaier and the guys at Stonemaier Games have come up with some cracking ideas, maybe 2 or 3 games worth of ideas, and try to put them all into one melting pot, and it just creates a real disconnect. First, let's talk about these wonderful sculptures. I mean, these are great. These minis are absolutely fantastic. They are pre-painted. There's some great detail on there. And you would think they would play an integral part of the game. And in reality, they're just a minor scoring mechanism in a spatial puzzle. And that's it. You get them as you progress up the advancement tracks. And you get these wonderful minis, which must make up a significant cost in the game. And they may score you some victory points, and that's it. You don't get any enduring benefit from them, and I think that's a real shame, because surely part of a civilization building game is to build something and then get an enduring benefit, and you don't really from these, other than maybe some victory points if you've got your rows and your columns. Secondly, the advancement tracks. Again, it's pushing queues up a board. You get a one-hit benefit from every advancement track that you go on. It's one hit. Again, there's no enduring kind of benefit from that, and there's no real sense of progression. It lacks a sense of progression. It lacks the feeling that, hey, I've discovered trains and therefore my transport network is going to increase. No, what you've done is you've discovered trains, you put a building on your board, and you're going to score a victory point for it, and that is it. Thematically, it's a little bit all over the place. If we take the technology cards, it's perfectly probable that you're going to pull out the technology card for the stock market, and there we go, that's something, you can gain some victory points for it, before you pull out the technology card for, I don't know, for plumbing and sewage. There we go. Which, how can you pull that card and action that card first if you haven't got plumbing and sewage? And where does that fit in to the rest of the theme here? Let's talk about the tile placement and the conquering. For me, it could be one or the other. Use tile placement and exploration and make that part of the game, or use the conquering and make that part of the game on an already explored map. But you've got these two things that are interconnecting, and you don't gain benefit from any of the advancements that you've got here. So you've got this disconnect. If I've discovered trains, surely maybe I should be able to explore further, explore faster. It doesn't work out that way. The kind of the real issue I have with it thematically is it talks about civilization, it talks about progression, it speaks of all these things, and it absolutely does not make the most of them. There doesn't feel to be that connect with it, and it's a little bit of a shame there. That's about the game overall, but what about the solo mode? As a solo player, I really like Scythe. I think it ranks very highly on my list of solo games. I think the Automa created in Scythe really works really well. You get this sense of being hunted throughout it. You get a sense of progression throughout it, that the enemy is growing stronger and he's benefiting from growing stronger. And he's targeting specific things on the map that you're actually working on as well. So moving towards where you have most units or where your mechs are. And I think that's a really, really good and involved way. And whilst the Automa here is, despite initially looking a little bit complex, is relatively simple. It feels, I don't know, emotionless. It feels like it's just racing to get points, and it has no concept or no consideration of how you're progressing your game or how it can disrail or derail your game. There are really good elements to it. There is the fact that you have the favoured track, and therefore you will pick a track like you would as a human player that you are going to favour the most and go up against that, but it's not challenging you it's just going away and doing its own thing. And that's where I think, as a solo player, this game doesn't quite live up to the heights that are with Scythe. There is an issue as well as you progress throughout the various income phases, that as you get towards the end phase, that there's some rubber banding goes on. And that happens in most of my games. No matter what I do, I may be nearly a full board rotation, so 100 points nearly ahead of the Automa. And what happens is, because he's scoring very hefty points here for, you know, for having buildings and having territories, he could have 8 territories, he could have 6 buildings. So what's that? 14 times 3, so that's 30, that's 30, 42 points he will get just on that first one alone. And you can see how they would tally up there. And that's where I feel that, you know, it's slightly unfair, this rubber banding. Now, you know, we can mitigate against it, we can change the levels on the Automa if necessary, but a lot of it depends on what faction you've got and whether that faction actually works well against how the Automa is going. So it's really easy with this Automa to signal end of game, maybe a good income phase before the actual end of the game, which is a bit of a shame. Finally, on the Automa, the only reason that Tapestry cards are used on the Automa is face down, so you can lock off where an income phase is. And yeah, for a game called Tapestry, where the Tapestry cards are a big part of that, it doesn't make the most of it for the Automa. So it's a fairly simplistic, functional Automa that's off and away doing its own thing. It doesn't necessarily have a direct impact on your kind of growth within the game and your enjoyment of the game. It's just a mechanism to keep score against you, whereas, as I say, in a game like Scythe, because of how the Automa is structured, it really feels like it's combating against you and not just trying to get its own points. All that being said, it's not to say that I don't like the game. I do. I enjoy playing this game. I think it's got a lot going for it. I do enjoy the various mechanics challenging me on each and every game that I have, and certainly the Automa sometimes being wildly in front of me and sometimes being wildly behind me. But always, invariably, the scores are finishing fairly close, within about 20 or 30 points one way or the other. So although I said there comes a rubber banding and it feels a little bit swingy, there's also tactics that you can employ to mitigate against that. Aesthetically, the game on the table looks fantastic. And, you know, when I've had it out and people have seen it, they just said, wow, that looks absolutely great. I do think there are some throwaway themes in it and some throwaway parts of it that don't, as I say, intrinsically link together, and that's where this game starts to lose me. It just doesn't, you don't get a sense of kind of being involved or immersed in this. You sometimes feel ultimately that all you are doing is pushing little cubes around and trying to get the most points. You don't feel like you're building a civilization. You don't feel like you're actually conquering anything. You don't feel like your landmarks are actually adding anything. But if you strip all that away and you look at a game that has some really good mechanics, really solid mechanics, they may not all pan out, but, you know, you're playing a game that, where those mechanics do actually work. You know, they may not link together, but they do work, and it does feel like you're playing a slick game. I'll say it just feels like that that Jamie and the guys at Stonemaier Games have just thrown a little bit too much at this, and it's difficult. You know, they're coming on the back of so many big hits, and I really wanted to like this game a lot. And as I say, I don't dislike it, and I don't blame those guys for what they've done. And I can understand why people absolutely love this game at the same time, but for me, it's kind of a middling game for me. If you ask me to play a game of this or a game of Scythe, I would choose Scythe as a solo player any day of the week. It will come out my table. I'm not going to get rid of Tapestry, because I think that there are times that I will need this kind of puzzle. I've kind of played it more or less almost exclusively for the last week or so, and I'm going to be putting it away tonight, and it probably won't come out for maybe a couple of months now. And that's a shame, because there is a lot of game here and it may well click for some people. As an overall experience for me, it doesn't quite hit the mark, and as a solo experience, I just find it a little bit too disengaged to keep me interested and to make me think that I'm playing against an Automa that is actually considering me as an opponent and not just trying to race away. So, thank you once again for tuning in to Not Board Gaming. I've been your host, I'm Mark, and that was our review of Tapestry by Stonemaier Games, designed by Stonemaier. Lots of game going on in there. There's absolutely no denying it. Top-notch production values as well means that when you lay it out on the table, it's a real joy to behold. However, as a solo experience and as a game, it doesn't all quite gel together. You just get the feeling that there are so many ideas in there, potentially too many ideas in there. It's not quite the fulfillment of any one idea, which is a bit of a shame there. You know, I'd like to see this expanded into a proper civilization game where you get this kind of element of progression and you feel like you are building technologies or building a civilization and you're getting an enduring benefit from it. As for the solo experience, it's more detached than Scythe. It doesn't really engage you in the same way as Scythe. You don't feel like you are battling against an opponent. You just feel like you are trying to get the most points rather than actually, you know, having somebody or you know, an artificial opponent that's coming up against you and actually making an impact on what you do. So yeah, I like it. It will come out on the table again, but I do think it's been a victim of its own hype as well. I think what you have here is a fairly good game. It's just not a fantastic game for me. It doesn't really tick all the boxes. I appreciate it. It will stay in my collection, but it's not going to come out for a while now. So yes, a little bit of a shame, but not everything is going to live up to the hype. And you know, certainly, you look at Stonemaier, what he's produced in the past and what he will continue to produce in the future. I could only dream of actually coming up with a concept like this. So, you know, that's no reflection on Stonemaier Games at all. It's just not a game for me. So once again, thank you very much for joining Not Bored Gaming. I've been your host. I'm Mark. Please remember that you can join us on Facebook as Not Bored Gaming, always BORED, and we're on Instagram as well. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and watch our other videos as well and our other reviews. And remember, if you can't find anybody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourself.